you all to really welcome our guest today. You know him. I have to tell you, when we first started coming in 2008, I didn't even know he had a real name. Seriously, everyone just called him Coach. Everyone I knew called him Coach. I'm like, who is? And somebody said, Darren. And I'm like, who is this Darren person? I didn't even know. So we are so blessed to have him and his family here to do life with. So please stand to your feet and help me welcome.
No. No. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with anything else.
We do it at communion. All right. Thank you, Bancrofts, for making this a lot easier to come up here today. Just a real quick introduction is because I know most of you and a lot of you know me, but for those of you that don't, I think this is my 15th or 16th year attending First Baptist / Crossroads. When I first started teaching here years ago, I was looking for a church to call home, and I went to a lot of different ones. And a lady that I worked with at school, Linda Booz, actually invited me to go to Jerul Baptist with her. And we went there for a Sunday, and we left, and she said, "You didn't like that, did you?" And I said, "Well, it was okay." And she said, "I got another church for you." She said, "Next Sunday, meet me across from Ransom's at First Baptist." And so I showed up here, and she kind of introduced me to a few people. She came a couple of weeks with me, and then I don't even know what church she actually goes to now. But I run into her every once in a while, and I thank her for introducing me to this church. This church has done a lot for me. I met my wife at this church for the second time. Some of you know the whole story, and you can ask her about that sometime. But we met here at church, and then 7 years ago we got married and had 3 wonderful little boys. Some of you know Ezekiel. He's the one that comes up and shows off his dance moves every once in a while. Then we had Gabriel. Gabe likes to run around before service and just go randomly talk to people, and we're like, "Who was it?" He's like, "I don't know. He's kind of got his mom's social skills." And then Daniel, our youngest, is 2, and he's the only child I know that can fall asleep during Dale's worship and wake up as soon as it's done. You would think it would be the other way around, but no. So, as I said, I work at the schools. I'm entering my 20th year of teaching here in Stockbridge. So you would think teachers getting up in front of an audience, piece of cake for them. It's not. Because, see, I'm used to teaching 10 years to 14-year-olds, somewhere in there. And when I get up in front, I'm pretty confident that I know more than they do. But getting up here today, I look around and I know that there's people out there that know a lot more about the Bible than I do. So that's what makes it hard for me. I don't know why I'm up here, okay? When Pastor Brian approached me months ago and said, "What Sunday do you want?" He didn't say, "Can you?" He said, "What Sunday do you want?" I thought, why me? What makes me? And then I thought, you know what? It's not about me. I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to deliver the message today, and I know there's someone out there that needs to hear it. Again, because it's not coming from me. When I started working on these sermons, I had 3 or 4 of them going all at the same time, and I just didn't know which one was going to be the one that was delivered. So hopefully all of you get something out of this today. I can't take credit for the sermon. During the school year, every morning I get to school about 5:30. School starts about 7:30. I like to get things done ahead of time. And I subscribe to Daily Hope with Rick Warren. Maybe some of you have heard of him. He wrote Purpose Driven Life and some of those books. And he does a Daily Hope sermon, 25 minutes every day. If you have extra 25 minutes where you're driving to work or something, I strongly suggest you sign up for it. It's free, and he does a great job. And this message he delivered a long time ago. And it kept coming up, and I just felt like this was the one I was supposed to give. Now, I did make a couple tweaks to it, so I don't have to pay royalties or anything to him for it. So, Before I get into it, if I'd just like to open with prayer. So, dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this opportunity. I know that the words that are going to come out are from you, and I just pray that whoever needs to hear these will receive them with an open heart. Dear Heavenly Father, I just pray that you'll be with me, that I may deliver it in a way that is educational and informative to others. Amen. All right. So my first slide is from years ago. My father and I, well, it's probably about 8 years ago, right before my wife and I got married, we went on a trip, a spring break trip. Not many people go on spring break trips with their father, but we drove down to Mississippi and stayed with his brother for a few days, and then we drove over to North Carolina and stayed with one of his Air Force buddies for a few days, and we golfed whenever we could along the way. And when we were coming home, I remember coming up to this tunnel that goes through the mountains, and maybe some of you have been through this tunnel before. And I just know that as I was preparing this sermon, this came back to me, because I can only imagine the engineers, when they were designing this, they came to this mountain and they said, well, this mountain is too tall. We can't go over it with a road, and obviously we can't go under the mountain with a road. And if we try to go around the mountain, it's just going to be too long. And so they said, well, the only thing we can do is we got to go right through the mountain. And that brings me to the sermon that says that there are events in our lives that we can't go over, we can't go under, and we can't go around, and we've got to go right through them. We've all had them. Maybe it's a financial situation. Maybe it's a health situation. Maybe it's a death of a loved one. Maybe it's a relational issue. But we've all had those. And when these losses or disasters or catastrophes happen, and they will happen because this world is broken and bad things do happen, what's our first reaction when you find out the news, when you get that phone call? The first reaction is shock. And I'm going to today hopefully talk a little bit about how you get through shock and how you help others get through that first stage of shock. So even if you're here today and you're not a Christian, hopefully there's something in here that will resonate with you. And in your insert, I've had them put in all of the verses. You're more than welcome to flip through your Bible and find them, but kind of the verse for the sermon is Ecclesiastes 9:12. It says, people never predict when hard times might come. Like fish in a net or birds in a trap, people are caught by sudden tragedy. We don't plan for these things to happen, but they do. If we knew it was coming, it probably wouldn't be such a shock to us. But we don't know they're coming. Sometimes we try to plan for it, but when it actually happens, it's a tragedy. And we're going to focus on how do we get through that. And right now, each one of you are in one of three categories. Either you know someone that's going through one of these things, you yourself are in the midst of one of these crises, or you don't realize it, but one is on the horizon for you. Okay? So all of us fit into one of those categories. Again, maybe it's a financial one. You've just been laid off from work. Maybe it's a medical issue. The test results have come back, and it's not good. Maybe it's a relational issue. Maybe someone has just walked out of your life. Maybe a husband or a wife or a child has left. Or maybe it's the death of a loved one. Okay? We've all been there or are going to be there. Before I get into the sermon notes, I got to take a quick stand on a soapbox for a minute and talk about small groups. And right when I say small groups, some of you just turned off. You're like, I know that because I was one of those. I would sit out there and people would come up here and talk about being in small groups and how great it was, and as soon as they started talking, I just kind of tuned out. My wife was in a small group, and she would try to get me in a small group, and I'd be like, I don't have time. This doesn't work. That doesn't work. This doesn't work. And I don't remember who was preaching the sermon, but earlier this calendar year, I went home and I said, I need to get in a small group. And I need to, and my small group's all here right now. And all of them don't even go to this church. But we started a small group that meets at 6 o'clock every morning. Or not every morning. 6 o'clock every Wednesday morning. We'd meet in my classroom during the school year. And then when school year got over, we started meeting on our back deck. And those guys that are part of that small group, they're the ones that are really going to draw from this. And those of you that are in small groups, when I'm talking about how to get a friend through a small group, or how to get a friend through a hard time, it's your small group that's really going to help you get through the hard time. So if you're not in a small group, please find one. Okay? And that's coming from a guy who I had no desire to get in a small group. Didn't think I needed a small group. Okay? So, off my soapbox, back to the sermon. All right. I don't believe there's a slide for this. Maybe there is. I don't know. Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So the law of Christ is to love others as yourself. So when we're carrying other people's burdens, we're doing what the Lord asks us to do. So how do you help a friend who's going through one of these rough times? The first thing you do is just show up. Show up. And a lot of you right now are saying, well, I don't know what to say. They just lost a loved one. They just lost their job. It doesn't matter what you say. Just show up. Maybe show up and shut up. Just show up and be there for them. You don't need to say anything. Don't wait for an invitation from them to come. No, show up. Many of us know the story of Job. Job had everything. He had everything going for him. Everything was good. And then everything went bad. He lost everything in the matter of a couple hours. Okay? He lost everything he had. And in Job 2:11 it says, when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. Pastor Brian always said if you just read them really fast it sounds good, but I don't think those sounded good. So when Job's three friends heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out for their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. They set out. They didn't wait. They didn't say, well, I heard about what happened to Job. That's too bad. I'll try to get there. No, they dropped what they were doing and they went. They didn't wait to see how he did. They didn't wait to see, oh, is he gonna call us and say he needs to talk? No, they went. And when something happens to a friend, that's what you got to do. You got to go. Seek them out. Don't wait for them to call you. Go. And I know, I almost feel like I could insert Mark the Stockbridgian, Jeff the Tecumsehen, and Brent the Sheboygan would all show up for me. I know they would. And that's, again, getting back to that small group thing. Those are going to be the people that show up for you. I'm not saying other people aren't going to, but those people that really know you, really understand what's going on in your life, they're going to be the ones that show up. They're not going to wait to see how you're doing. They're going to show up for you. So the first thing you need to do when you're helping a friend get through one of these is just be there for them. Show up and be there for them. The second thing you need to do is share the pain. Share the pain. In continuing on in Job, so right after his friends decided to go, it says, when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud. They tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. Now, if Jeff and Joe and Brent showed up with dust sprinkled on their head, I might think something was wrong. You don't have to go that far, guys. All right? But in Middle Eastern culture, what that symbolized was, we're with you. We're going through this with you. Imagine sitting there for 7 days and not saying a word. That goes back to number one. You don't need to have the words to say. You just need to have the time to go and be there with them. Share in their pain. And sometimes the greater the grief, the fewer the words you really need to say. Just being there is what they need. You know, if someone has a bad hair day, you can talk to them for 30 or 40 minutes on the phone about it, and that's great. Okay? But if they've lost a loved one, just be there. Put an arm around them. Let them know that you care about them. Okay? Again, getting back, Rick Warren is the one that presented this sermon the first time. And he presented this sermon shortly after his son had committed suicide. And he talked about his small group and how they showed up and how they spent the night with him. They didn't leave him. They were there for him. They did life with him through that. In Romans 12, it says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn." Again, be there when your friends are going through those hard times. Okay? So the first thing is show up. The second one is share the pain. And then the third way to help a friend get through a hard time is take the initiative. Take the initiative. And in Galatians it says, "Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." And the key words in there, do good. What can you do? When someone has just lost their job, or someone has just lost a loved one, or someone is going through one of these tough times in their life, do good. Run an errand for them. Mow their lawn. Bring them dinner. Do something. And small towns do a great job of this. I can remember back to when I was probably 10 or 11. My grandfather passed away of a heart attack, and my dad's family was kind of spread out throughout the country because a lot of them were in the military, and they all came home, and we had my grandpa's funeral. And the night of my grandpa's funeral, my uncle died in a car accident. And as a kid, I can still remember my grandma's house and our house. There was so much food that people brought because they knew that in that time, my parents didn't need to worry about cooking meals. They didn't need to worry about things like that. And I know that our church does a great job of that because I know that when each of our boys were born, we had people bringing us meals about every other night. And at first I thought, well, they think we can't take care of ourselves? Well, when you got a little one and then two little ones and then three little ones, it was nice. And it was just, it's not that they were doing that because they wanted to show us that they cared about us and that they loved us. So if you know somebody, right now some of you are thinking, I know somebody going through something. What can you do for them? You know, and maybe it doesn't seem like that big a deal, but, you know, just showing up, calling them and saying, hey, I'm going to pick you up for church on Sunday. Okay? Not giving them the opportunity to say, no, I'm picking you up. We're going. Okay? Don't say the dreaded words. Call me if you need something. That's the easy thing to do. Yeah, call me. They're not going to call you, folks. They're aching. They're grieving. They're not going to pick up a phone and say, hey, yeah, would you make me dinner tonight? No. People are not going to do that. We need to take the initiative to go and do those things for them. Okay? So right now, can you think of someone in your life who's going through something, and is there something you can do? Can you do good to others? Especially those that are in the body of Christ. Especially those that are in your small group. Are there things you can do for them? So you're helping a friend get through one of these catastrophes. You know, there's show up, share the pain, and take the initiative. And in my view, it's easier to help others. When you're going through it, sometimes we don't want all of that help. Sometimes we push away. So first we looked at how to help a friend, and now the second part, and by the way, I think this is going to be a record sermon as far as time-wise, so you guys might want to jot this down and keep track for Pastor Brian when he returns about, All right, so the first is how to help a friend. The second part is how to survive yourself. And the first thing you need to do when the news comes in, when something happens, is you need to cry out to God. Cry out to God. Psalms 50:15 says, "And call upon me in the day of trouble. I shall rescue you, and you will honor me." Most of us probably don't realize that we honor God. We don't realize that we honor God when we depend on Him, when we call out to Him. That's showing God honor by us saying, "Help me get through this. I need you. I can't do this on my own." So, again, those of you that are going through something right now, are you praying about it? Are you constantly asking God to help you with it? Or are you saying, "I can get through this on my own. I can get through this on my own." Okay? It's hard to get through it on your own. You need to go to God. And then you also need those other people coming around you to help you get through it. Lamentations 2:19 says, "Rise up during the night and cry out. Pour out your hearts like water to the Lord. Lift up your hands to Him in prayer." I believe that this talks about at night because we've all been there when you've had that loss, when you've had that news. You try to go to bed at night and you can't sleep because you're thinking about it. It's there. Okay? I think that's why it says rise up during the night and cry out. Those nights you can't sleep, pray to God. Talk to God. Get down on your hands and knees and just let Him have it. Okay? We're honoring Him by letting Him understand or letting Him know. Now, does He know what's going on in our body? Yes, He already knows. But when we express it and when we talk about it, we're honoring God. So the first thing you need to do when you're going through that is you need to cry out to God. The second thing you need to do, and this is the hard one for a lot of us, is let others help you. You've got to be able to, okay? The way to help a friend through is to show up, take the initiative, all those. Well, you've got to be willing to accept those people showing up. You've got to be willing to let those people help you. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity." Those people that show up are showing up because they love you. They're not showing up just to say, "Look at me, I'm here to help you." No, they're showing up because they care about you and they want to help you get through this. Again, it goes back to small groups. Your small group's going to be one of the first ones that show up. And if you're not in a small group, it's hard for people to know what you're going through and to show up. So again, if you're not in a small group, I really encourage you to find a small group that you can share what's going on. Because sometimes we're going through these things and other people don't even know we're going through them. But if you're in a small group, they know what you're going through and they're going to show up. And you're going to let them help you. Don't act like it didn't happen. Don't blow it off. You know, you get that phone call you go to work and you get the news that you've been laid off. Don't act like it didn't happen. It did happen. And there's going to be a time of grief. You get the test results back. Don't act like it didn't happen. It's happening. You've got to embrace it and try to get through it. But on the other hand, be easy on yourself. Don't beat yourself up because you lost your job. Don't beat yourself up because someone walked out on you. Don't beat yourself up because, okay, you have to understand or you have to believe that, let's see, how do I want to say this? A lot of us want to put it on ourselves, like I did something wrong, that's why that happened. I did something and that's why that happened. It's not always that. Okay? Understand that you have to be easy on yourself and just say, hey, I need to find a way to get through this. And human nature is to kind of withdraw from everybody. Say, well, I lost my job. I don't want to talk to others about it. I've got diagnosed with, I want to withdraw. I don't want to go out and seek others. You need fellowship. You need to be around others. Again, it gets back to the small group thing. You need those people in your lives. You need people who are going to show you that they love you, that are going to be there, and they're going to do things for you. And you have to let them do those things for you, because you need to be surrounded by those who care about you and who want to see you survive. So when you're trying to get through one of these on your own, you need to cry out to the Lord. You need to let others help you. And then the third thing you need to do is you need to trust in the Lord. And in Jeremiah 17:7 and 8, it says, "But blessed are those who trust in the Lord and have made the Lord their hope and confidence. They are like trees planted along a riverbank with roots that reach deep into the water. Such trees are not bothered by the heat or worried by long months of drought. Their leaves stay green and they never stop producing fruit." So we're compared to trees and the roots. And then in Colossians 2:6 and 7, it says, "And now, just as you trusted in God, in Christ to save you, trust Him too for each day's problems. Live in vital union with Him. Let your roots grow down into Him and draw up nourishment from Him. See that you go on growing in the Lord and become strong and vigorous in the truth that you were taught. Let our lives overflow with joy and thanksgiving for all He has done." So again, comparing us to the roots growing in God. In both of these passages, we're being compared to trees whose roots are in God. And if our roots are in God, we're going to flourish even through the tough times. My question to you is, what are you doing to grow those roots? How are your roots growing? Meaning, what are you doing? Are you showing up on Sunday, listening to the Word, and then going home, and then coming back next Sunday and listening to the Word? Because if that's all you're doing, your roots are going to be really shallow. And when it comes time to trust, it's really hard to trust someone that you're not talking to, someone that you're not, interacting with. My 4-year-old son Gabe, if I brought him up here and stood him on this ledge right here, and I said, "Jump, Daddy will catch you," he would jump, and I'd catch him, because we have a relationship. He trusts me. If I put Gabe up here, and I had Dave Stoles come up and say, "Okay, Gabe, jump, I'll catch you," Gabe's going to look at him and go, I'm not so sure. And it's not that Dave's a bad guy, but Gabe doesn't know Dave. It's hard for Gabe to trust in Dave if he doesn't know him. So it's hard for us to trust in God if we're not spending time getting to know Him. And if you can't trust in God, it's really hard to get through these times. You can have people show up. You can have people do things for you. But ultimately, if you don't have trust in God and you don't have that relationship with God, it's going to be very hard to get through that, even with all of the other things happening. So if you're going to take one thing away from this, please take away the fact that you need to have that relationship with God so that you can trust in Him, so He can provide people to get you through whatever you're going through. Okay? Again, I told you it was going to be a very short sermon. Okay? I just felt like that is what I was supposed to preach on. Someone out there needed to hear some of that, all of it, I don't know. But I just want to thank you for listening. You're probably my best class ever. No one got up to go to the bathroom. No one showed up late. It was great. So thank you. And I think at this time I'm just supposed to turn it over to Dirk. Dirk was saying Brian. Brian was saying Dirk. So Brian's my elder, so I'm going to go with what he says. Dirk. All right.